Steve, as you know, has the knack of putting his foot in it sometimes and of upsetting the status quo, and we would have him no other way. And if you look at the history of Oasis, it's been going since 1985, and it's grown and grown, and it's been working with the vision that Steve had and still has. And over that time, Steve has been promoted quite a lot. In 2005, 6, when you wrote that book, the one about substitution.
Oh, so yeah, the lost message.
The lost message.
Yeah.
He was called the son of Satan. 2013, exactly in February 2013, the Christianity Today brought up your message of integrity, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was called a matter of integrity.
A matter of integrity. And he was promoted. He was called Satan. Then we come forward 5 years, and in 2014 when he brought out Trust in the Bible, and I haven't got my notes, I can't even see them. And then, was it last year, October last year, when he started the 95 Thesis, wasn't it? And then suddenly he's being promoted again.
Yeah.
And he is now
I am the Antichrist. Christianity Magazine published an article, and the headline was, Steve Chalke isn't just non-Christian, he is the Antichrist. So there you go. As I say, this is very good news for the world, really, because if I'm the Antichrist, most people can rest in their beds comfortably, can't they? You know? I'm 62, I live in South London, and I get the 159 bus to work every morning here. So I think around the world they can rest comfortably.
Yeah. So you're in the presence. But one thing we can say, and for everybody that knows Steve, is that he's a man of God. More importantly, he's a man of faith, but also he has the heart of a pastor, and he cares. Which leads me on to my first question, really, to you. Why? Why did you, in 2013, I know you've been thinking about it for quite a while, because a few of us in the church have been talking about it. Why, in 2013, did you decide you had to shout and not whisper?
Well, that's a very good question. There's more than one answer to it, and they all kind of come together like tributaries to a river. And the first one is this, though not necessarily in this order, if you see what I mean. The first one was that when I first came to, in my spare time, being the minister of the church here, there were very few people that came. In fact, there were 10 people that came, and they used to sit in the auditorium, which is big in there, every Sunday in pews, as we had them then. But they always sit in the same pew, and they couldn't afford a minister, and the church was really bankrupt. And I did this in my spare time. I asked whether I could lead them, because I could see that the whole place had potential. You know, I could see what could happen here. So every Sunday morning I'd turn up, and literally, well, sometimes there was a pianist they used to get who worked in a West End bar, and on his way home he'd come and he'd play piano for their hymns, and then they'd pay him £25 out of the offering. There was only ever about £40 in the offering, and they'd pay him £25 cash, which is highly illegal, of course, and off he'd go. And then on other Sundays, when he couldn't do this, we used a cassette player, you know, an actual whirly cassette. And the first time this happened, because they used to set the hymns, they're all lovely people. And they used to, and so I used to stand in front of the pew and announce what we were going to do. And I remember one Sunday I announced, it was the first time I'd had the cassette player, and I said, and now we will sing our first hymn, and it was Abba Father, Let Me Be. Do you know that? And then a lady who's died since she toddled to the end of the row, and she hit the big button on the tape player. You know those big clunky ones? Do you remember that? Clunk, and it played "Abba Father, Let Me Be," and we all sang it. And then at the end, she went clunk, and it stopped. And then the next hymn I looked down after some prayers and things was "Abide with Me," and she went clunk, and it started playing "Abide with Me," and I realised that because they didn't have CD technology, we only had tape. We could only sing songs that followed each other in mission praise. So we just sang 4 songs that followed on from one another. But then this guy started coming. In actual fact, his name's Gareth Streeter. He works for Oasis and he was part of the church for a long while. But Gareth lives in Croydon now. In fact, I've been talking to Gareth today. But Gareth started coming along, and he trained at London School of Theology. He starts coming along, and when you've got just 10 people in a church or so, you want the church to grow, do you know? And each Sunday, new people would come, and I talked to them afterwards. They'd say, "Oh, that was great. I really enjoyed it. Oh, it's wonderful," and all that kind of thing. But you knew they were never going to come back again, because actually people come to be part of a congregation for a sense of community. And I knew they just weren't going to get it, and they never did come back. So you pray and pray for an early adopter. And one Sunday, Gareth wandered in, and he said, "Oh, I'll see you next Sunday." And I thought, well, I don't suppose I will see him next Sunday. But he did come back. And to cut a long story short, I don't know how long this took. I'm sorry I'm coughing. I've got asthma. I had flu, then pneumonia. It's okay. And then now I'm left with an asthmatic cough, so you can't catch it. But it won't stop until the weather gets warm, which is going to be about July for about 2 days. Anyway, Gareth came back, and he came back. And I don't know how long this took, and I can't remember the details now. But one Sunday, Gareth says to me, should I welcome people? And nobody had actually offered me any help at all. So I can't even remember if it was doing the coffee or welcoming people. But anyway, whatever it was, Gareth started doing it. And then a few weeks later, he said, "Well, I can organise a rota, if you like." I thought, God, this is fantastic. Somebody's going to do something. Yeah! And then we go on like this. And so there's the 2 of us working at it. And then slowly people begin to come, and then they join rotas and things like that. And then one day, Gareth said to me, "What you need to know, Steve, is I'm gay." And I think he was expecting me to say, "Well, then you can't come," or something like that. I have no idea. But actually, Gareth and I were the leadership of the church. See what I mean? You know, it was us. And so that moved the whole church forward, if you see. Do you see what I mean? And the other thing is, Gareth and others started bringing their friends because people were welcome, then more people would come, and more people would come, and more people would come. So it was just that was 2003-ish. Well, it was 2003, 2004. The other thing is, in exactly that year, really, Oasis began to develop schools. And you probably know we run a lot of schools now. In fact, by next September, I found out today, by next September we will be running 53 schools. That's 30,000 kids. Now, in a cohort of 30,000 kids, how many of those young people will know they're gay or be on a journey towards discovering their sexuality? And what happened was the church here developed in a very inclusive way, but there was no point in shouting about it. Well, it wasn't that we were scared, it was just that we didn't. And then the schools were developing as well. And then this other thing happened. A guy started coming to the church called Matthew, and Matt Hurst, who's fantastic. And Matt eventually became a leader of the church here. But one day he told me that, you see, he'd been in 2 denominations. And he's very smart, Matt. I mean, you know him. Very smart, highly intelligent, a great engaging person. And we've got some steps that go up to the auditorium there that we rarely use now because people come through the coffee shop. But Matt told me when I finally got to know him, I think he said, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think he said that he'd come and he'd stood at the steps on and off every Sunday, every other Sunday for about 4 months. And he'd stood, there's perhaps 10 steps, I don't know, and he'd stood at the bottom and he'd listened to people singing, but he'd not been able to find the courage to come up the steps, even though he'd heard that we would be welcoming. And that made a huge impact on me. I mean, the impact is, why do you keep coming back? Do you know? Anyway, Matt came, he became part of the church in the end, and then his boyfriend Nathan started coming along, and they both from Christian backgrounds, both thrown out of churches for their sexuality. And then this extraordinary thing happened. One day, Matt and Nathan come up to me and they say, are we going to get a civil partnership? This is before marriage, you know, same-sex marriage was allowed. And I said, oh, great, that's really good. And they said, well, we're asking you about it because we wondered whether, after our civil partnership, you would come and pray with us a private prayer. And, you know, normally you think of good things to say if you're anything like me about 3 days after the event. Does that happen to you? You think, if only I'd have thought of saying that does that happen to you? And that's 99% of the time. But they said to me, would you come and say a private prayer? And on this occasion, my brain worked fast enough. So I looked at them both. I said, no, I certainly won't. I'm not going to do that. I could see them both looking crestfallen. And I said, why would we say a private prayer? You're part of this church. We'll have a public celebration. That's what we do. And we'll all say public prayers. And that's what we did. So in actual fact, they went to the registry office and did the civil partnership thing, as many straight couples do, actually. Still, in some churches, that's all you can do. And then we did actually what was a wedding for them, although it wasn't allowed to be called that, but it actually was, you know. And it was one, people still say it was one of the most spiritual experiences they ever encountered. And then what happened was, I realised the government were planning to do something about same-sex marriage. And, you know, the rumour was there. And I realised that, one, we were leading a completely inclusive church. And two, we had thousands and thousands, probably about 20,000 at that time, kids in our schools around the country and thousands of staff. And I realised, because we're a Christian foundation and because once gay marriage is talked about, I thought what will happen is, you know, half the church will be up in arms and there'll be all those statements about if you allow same-sex marriage, you know, the universe is going to melt down, the moral fabric of creation will disappear, you know, you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, it's the end times and all that kind of stuff. And I knew that was going to happen. If this ever, and I thought to myself, now here's my little problem, long answer, but when you've got 5,000 or so staff, which is what Oasis has got, and 20,000 kids in schools or whatever we had then, and endless other volunteers, how on earth do you communicate with them? You can't. Let me tell you, you can't. I send people emails, they never even open them. You know, kind of like, how do you communicate with that many people? And I realised this, with the help of just a friend of mine, Brian McLaren, who some of you will know, who I talked to about all of these things. And I said, Brian, what I've got to try and do is create an umbrella, because I know there's going to be an onslaught and there's going to be endless kids or teachers in our schools, staff members around this country who are going to wonder where they stand once the church starts going on how terrible same-sex marriage is. How can I create this umbrella? And I realised that I could only communicate with absolutely every person inside Oasis if I made a public statement. And then I realised that the media would carry the message to everyone. And even the anti-press that I'd get from the Christians, which I knew was going to be huge, would actually still serve my real goal of creating a message of inclusion. And this is the last funny bit of this story. So all these things worked together, but it was the fact that gay marriage bill was coming, but we didn't know why, that made it urgent. And the funny thing is, I don't know if there's anyone here who's part of the church then, we talked about it in the leadership team. I wrote this long paper. It was kept under wraps. I did a deal with Christianity magazine to publish it and all the rest of it. And then the week before, I thought, I can't publish this paper, which I know is going to create this huge stink, without telling people in the church. So we had a special church meeting on the Wednesday, and we simply said to people, come along on Wednesday evening, because we're going to show you something we're going to publish, and it might cause a bit of a fuss. So a load of people turned up in the auditorium there, and we handed out copies of this thing about LGBT inclusion. And everybody in the church, they read it in little small groups and things. And then somebody was chairing it, not me, said, have you got any questions for Steve? And there's this long silence because it's groups. And then somebody, Hillary, her name is Hillary, she puts up her hand and she said, she's very smart. She said, yeah. She said, the question is this. She's very smart, Hillary. She said, why have you dragged us all the way here just to tell us you're going to do this? We know this. And so it was like no one could believe it was worth coming out for, because this is where we all were. And I had to say to them, this may not be news to you, but trust me, there is going to be an explosion. And that is what happened. So that's the story.
Thank you. Right, we all heard, and a lot of people here felt the rumble from that. What about you? How did it affect you? Having friends that disagreed with you now, you were once one of the main speakers at different places, suddenly you're the Antichrist.
The only place I can go to speak now on a big public stage is Greenbelt. Hey, it's a Greenbelt. If it wasn't for Greenbelt, I'd never get a chance. Yeah, so, I've spoken everything from Keswick to New Wine to Spring Harvest to all those things, and around the world. And of course, I never get asked to do any of that anymore. In fact, people don't talk to me. But that genuinely is okay. If I say it's okay, you probably think it's not okay, but it really is okay. And the reason it's okay is because of this. Well, there's more than one reason. First of all, you need to stand up and speak out for what you really believe. You can't live your life hiding away. You get one life, and we none of us in this room know if we'll be here next week, do we? To be honest. So say what you believe now. Stand up for what you think now. I think that's the first thing. We need to find that courage. We need to find that courage. But the second thing is, you referred, Dave, to the book I'd written a long time before called Lost Message of Jesus, which was about how I don't believe in the concept of what's called penal substitution, i.e. there's an angry God who doesn't like us. And the first thing God wants to say about you is, you are under my wrath. I'm not looking at you particularly. There's nothing. You're awful in your sin. That there we are under the wrath of God. But Jesus dies in our place, and God gets the death of his son, and Jesus takes the punishment, and God wreaks havoc on Jesus. And then he says, good, the price has been paid. I can now forgive. I don't think that is, I think that's such a warped and twisted view of the God of love. I could talk for a long time about that and the damage that view of God has done. But when I published this book, I got into a lot of trouble. In fact, I was put on a kind of trial by the Evangelical Alliance. It was a voluntary trial in the sense they can't, but there was a big meeting at Marsham Street Church, and about 700-800 people came. It was packed, and I was put on trial for believing this terrible thing that God wasn't ugly, and there was much talk then, of course, me not being thrown out of the Evangelical Alliance, which they didn't do actually at that time. But that's when people stopped booking me for things and all sorts of things. I think that's when you said I became, the son of Satan? Yeah. Or so kind of like I get mail every day of my life like that. you know, telling me all sorts of things. I'm apostate, I'm going to hell, I've betrayed Christ, I'm not a Christian. Every single day of my life. It's just one of those things. But the great bit of news about it is really great news. You kind of get used to it. And this was a long time ago, wasn't it? I mean, a long time ago. You just get used to it. And then we started launching schools. Oasis started launching schools. And you think, what on earth's that got to do with this? Well, when you launch a school in a troubled area that's probably in special measures, and you know, you're asked by the local authority and central government to go and take the reins of this school, you have to go and do loads of public meetings with the council, public meetings with the parents, public meetings with the community, public meetings, on and on and on and on. And you get harangued, you know, because people say, what's wrong with our school? Well, you know, it is in special measures, and no kids are passing any exams, and the turnover rate of teachers is higher than the turnover rate of kids, and you know, and that's a truancy problem, and there's this problem and that. You know, those are the kind of things that have sometimes happened. And now Oasis is much bigger, and I'm less involved in that. But I used to go and to these public meetings, and people used to swear and curse, and they'd have banners out as I went in, Steve Chalke, evangelical Bible basher. So that at the same time as being bashed by, and it really was odd, because these were the same years. You know, it's the same time as all the evangelicals were telling me I wasn't a Christian because I didn't believe in a God of hate who beats up his son on the cross. At the same time, I mean, all these secular bodies telling me he's an evangelical. There was even a piece of news published in Bristol, city of Bristol, because we were taking on a school and we were going to introduce a blazer because there was no uniform. And blazers, of course, have those pockets like that, you know, there. And the Bristol newspaper ran an article that said the only reason we were interested in, introducing a uniform with a blazer was so that the students could put the Bibles that we issued them with in their pockets. And it's just bizarre to be attacked by both ends at the same time. But the hostility, you just get used to it. You just get used to it. So the truth is, to be honest, by the time it came to the LGBT thing, honestly, I can honestly tell you, mate, it doesn't make the slightest bit of difference to me. I even people say don't read all the bad press you get, you know, but I'll read stuff on Twitter and Facebook sometimes because I'm hunting almost for a decent biblical argument against me. I don't mean against me. I'm kind of desperate almost for somebody to come up with a half-decent theological, biblically based argument as to why the inclusion of LGBT people can't be allowed. I'm desperate for it. Do you know, I kind of think, like, bring it on. Do you know, just put it in front of me so I can think about this big thing that I've missed. And I'm always desperately disappointed in that sense because truly, you see, I'd say to you, though it gets thrown at me constantly that I've gone liberal and I'm not Christian and all the rest of it, my challenge to the church is read the Bible. Read the Bible well, study the Bible, get to grips with the text in its context, do better theology, do better Bible reading, because when you read the Bible better and you read the Bible deeper, actually you will move away from these warped and immature ideas that turn a God of love into someone who wants to expel people from the church because of their sexuality.
Thank you. With that, excuse me, the words, the hurtful words, the people against you, how it's affected you, but how has it affected Oasis Charity? Because a lot of your backers are the evangelical church.
Yes.
A lot of the people that came to the college were from evangelical families.
Yes.
How was you coming out? Oasis coming out.
Well,
stop there.
No, you shouldn't, because that's the funny thing, you see. Normally, when people stand up for the LGBT community, they themselves are gay, you know, or very many of them. And that's it's a really interesting thing, you know, because Cornelia, my wife, kept saying to me, you know what people are saying, don't you? They're saying that we're just about to announce that our marriage is ended, you know, and and that's gone away now. I think people think, oh, blow, he's carried on with that, being married to that woman for so long now. But I say to Connie, do not divorce me, because if you divorce me, that's a kind of like, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so, right, how has it affected the financial, everything of the Oasis charity that you've set up from scratch, that has grown? You had the college, you got the schools. It doesn't affect schools as such, but how has it affected the work of Oasis?
Well, it had a huge impact, but I knew it would do. So it has cost us millions of pounds, literally millions of pounds, and lots of friendships, and from big givers and small givers. But I knew that would happen. The tragedy of it all, the agony of wrestling with this actually was, it's okay for me to say things, but what's the impact on somebody else's life? You know, I stand up and make a big speech and everybody goes, oh yeah, that's wonderful. But then income fails and we have to make someone redundant. And then you think about their family, their children, the security of those children. It's like a huge responsibility to carry around. And against that, you had to balance the fact that we've got to have this conversation in the evangelical church and in the church in the UK. And so, again, it's honestly true. So for years and years and years and years, I think I was reported in the press, and I still see it sometimes, that I suddenly changed my view and I swapped directions and things like that. That's really not the case at all. In fact, years and years ago, there's, as some of you would know, a Baptist minister called Roy Clements, who was a real card-carrying evangelical, Bible-thumping. Roy would admit that, I'm sure. And
he would.
Yeah.
He still is.
Yeah, and I used, this is honestly true, I used to read stuff that Roy and his group had produced, the Cambridge papers. I still get the Cambridge papers, but it's a very kind of fundamentalist, right-wing, traditional reading of the Bible, or in my view, non-reading of the Bible sometimes. But Roy was part of that, and then it was suddenly revealed that he was gay, and he left his church. I think it was called Eden Baptist Church in Cambridge. But he was really the darling of the evangelicals. So I would be often asked to speak on big stages for them and do celebrations and all of that kind of stuff. But Roy would be asked to do Bible readings. And then this happened. And then some months later, or perhaps a year, Christianity magazine asked me, because they knew that I'd been on stages with him, to write an article, write an open letter to him. Because Roy wrote an open letter to the Evangelical Alliance, or to No Christianity magazine or something like that, I can't remember the details, and I was asked to write back to him. And I wrote a letter which wasn't condemning of him at all, because I didn't feel condemning of him. I felt that he'd been trapped. I feel, and I didn't really know him. But I talked about living by commitments that we make, etc., because I need to make. There've been loads of times. I've been married for 37, 38 years. How many times in 38 years of being married do you feel like, well, I wish I'd chosen differently? That's just life, isn't it? That's not because I got a weak marriage. It's because I've been married 38 years. And so I've learned about making a commitment and living faithfully to it, etc. And Roy, so I addressed the things in Roy's letter, but that was, I've talked with Roy about it now, but that was taken by some people when I said what I said about the acceptance of gay people, as I'd done a 360-degree turnaround from where I was. But I was never, I don't think, judgmental of Roy, because I'm a church leader. I am a pastor at the end of the day. That's what I do. I care for people. I've forgotten what the question was now. So
how's it affected the charity?
So when I, finally said what I said, I knew it would affect the charity. So in the years leading up to it, that's why I'm telling you this long story. In the years leading up to it, and the senior leaders here, somebody like Joy Medeiros, who some of you know, she's our group chief executive. I used to say to Joy, do you know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a book about the inclusion of LGBT people, and I know someone's got to do this and no one steps forward and we're not talking about it. So I'll write the book, but I know the impact on Oasis. So I'll write the book and I'll publish it under another name just to get the conversation started. And the more I thought about that, that was ridiculous because it would it wouldn't get a conversation started unless I published it or someone published it. So I used to pray all the time, honestly, it was one of my most frequent prayers, Lord, I'm willing to do this, but you have to show me how to do it without hurting other people. And then I had another idea, and it was that I'd write a book under my name and put it in my will and it get published when I was dead. And then I realised, because it's stupid ideas, but you go round and round and round and round this stupid thing. And then I finally realised, no, I had to do it in my own name. And I just used to say, Lord, give me the moment and the opportunity and make it come together so I can do this. Now, having said this has cost Oasis a lot of money, and it has, and a lot of support, the truth is that the development of the schools in Oasis particularly, we'd run houses before then, but the development of the schools meant that we had resources and funding that came from a lot of sources, from government, local authorities, but also from corporates and charities, etc., outside the evangelical world. And so I suddenly realised I, of all evangelical leaders, was in a position to do this with least damage. And so I did it, and there was damage, and there has been cost. But on the other hand, there are things that if you Google my name, right, I've done it for a long time, but if you Google my name, the first few pages are all about Steve Chalke's the Antichrist, and, Steve Chalke's done this and done that, and we hate him and all that kind of stuff. Well, if you're a local council or a government group looking me up, so for instance, there's a big accountancy firm that we're just working with, just developing a relationship with, and to work in the States actually. And I know darn well when I contact them, they Google my name. And the great thing is, you couldn't pay for the advertising that the first page of Google gives to us. Because they all suspect that I'm a Baptist minister, well, I am a Baptist minister, and therefore I'm anti-gay and I'm proselytizing and all those kind of things, and probably anti-women in leadership and all the rest of it. So then they Google my name and they discover that all the people they think I am actually hate me. And, and they go, wow! And I know that there are significant deals we've won simply based on the terrible publicity that I've been given by evangelicals. So praise God for that. Literally, is anybody into PR advertising here, comms and all the rest of it? Well, if you are, you will know that to even get above the noise, you could spend £500,000 on an advertising campaign over the next 3 months and not even make an impression. Yet, the evangelicals in this country have created this massive fundraising and publicity campaign for Oasis, and it's not cost us anything. It's fantastic.
You've lost a lot of money, or not you personally, but the charity has lost support and lost money as well. How has it been for you with the gay community? I hate saying gay community, because there's no such thing as a gay community, but with the LGBT groups, how they responded to you? Not the LGBT people of faith, but the LGBT groups. There was a little bit, and probably still is, I don't know, a little bit from a minority of people said, oh, do you know, you're a Johnny come lately to this, and we've been saying this forever, and now you've stood up and said it, and
and everybody takes notice of you for saying it, and it's not fair and it's not right, and you changed your mind and all of that. And I understand all those feelings, I do, I really do, because I think that so many lives have been scarred and hurt and destroyed utterly by the church's opposition and oppression of LGBT people. And I cry, I weep for that. I have a friend who's part of this church, and I was telling this story earlier, and one Sunday night, before the auditorium was converted in the way it is now, we had a communion service, and this must be 5-6 years ago, and he came to the front and he took communion and he was crying, and I sat with him afterwards, and he said, "This is the first time I've ever taken communion in my life and really felt that I'm accepted. I've never felt I'm truly accepted anywhere." Sometime later, he told me he'd struggled with a lot of psychological problems, a lot of mental health issues in his life. And sometime later, in another conversation, he said to me, "Steve, I realise this. My problem isn't that I'm gay. My problem is that I'm evangelical." He said, "That's what's destroyed my life. I've been destroyed systematically." And when he said he'd been destroyed, he really has had enormous number of issues to come across in his life, psychologically, and in terms of, as I say, his mental health. And he said, and what had actually happened is at the age of 13, he told his church that he thought he was gay. And they'd spent all the time period between his 13th birthday and when he became 18, that whole 5 years they'd spent trying to cast demons out of him. And of course it hadn't worked. I've got another friend actually who told me that his church, who's part of the church here, he told me that the church had spent some time trying to cast demons out of him, and he said, but it didn't work. But he said a few years later the pastor announced that he was gay, so it's obviously catching. So what happened was, can you imagine being a teenager, a 13-year-old, and you live the 5 years of your informative teen years being told you are possessed by demons? Just incredible, isn't it? Really, just incredible. And so I can't remember the question because I get so caught up in these stories. But I think that, let me say that I just think that whatever people inflict on me, whatever they ban me from or whatever, I'm fortunate because it doesn't matter to me. It really doesn't matter. The reason is because I've been there and done all that. Do you know what I mean? So you've done it. So there's nothing in me that yearns for anything, to tell you the truth, very much, except the love of this community, and those of you who are part of this community know I rarely go out. I went speaking on Sunday. I went to a church in Bath because it's going to become part of Oasis. I went for that reason. I used to tour the world speaking and all the rest of it. I never do that because what I love to be is here with people, not whizzing around the place. But the point is this, in all of this, whatever I endure, it is not, it's good to say this to you, Dave, because I've never said this to you. I know that whatever people say about me and do to me and ban me from and etc., it's only a tiny little echo of the pain I know that you've felt in your life.
Thank you.
Because it's true, isn't it?
Mm.
You have been, because I've known Dave a long time, right? The way you have been treated because of your sexuality by parts of the church is absolutely disgraceful. It is disgraceful because it is a disgrace, isn't it? And so what is my pain compared with the suffering that many of you in this room have experienced? So I've counted it a privilege to kind of vicariously walk this way with you.
A real vicar.
Whether you're gay or straight is a bit like the issue of whether are you right-handed or left-handed. Have you got brown hair or ginger hair? You know, I think it's just who we are. And in the church here, as you know, you're a person. The question is, you know, how committed are you to serving Christ? And so at every level of the church's life, people who are gay and straight, or black or white, are included. And the question of your skin colour or your sexuality or your gender isn't the important thing. It's just about that total inclusion. I think that in relationship to what you said earlier, Dave, a couple of us were talking in the break there, and something I feel really passionately, because people will say to me all the time, but you know, the theology of all of this about leadership or whatever it is really difficult, you know, and the Greek words and the Hebrew words and the tenses and the clauses and all of that kind of thing. So here's the thing, I genuinely believe this to be the case at the deepest level. A story, Karl Barth was a great theologian, probably the most significant theologian of the 20th century, German theologian. And Karl Barth died in, I can't remember the 1970s, and he went on a tour before his death in his last years of America, and he spoke, I think, at Princeton University, and he was asked what the greatest truth that he'd discovered. He wrote a huge book which is called Church Dogmatics. It defined in many ways theology in the 20th century. And Karl Barth was asked this, what's the deepest insight you have, deepest theological insight that you have in all these years? And Barth looked down, and this is well attested from many people. He looked up and he said, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And it was ridiculed. But it was a fantastic, theologically deep insight. That is the message of the Bible. Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. So why do I tell you that story? Because you don't need to know any Greek or any Hebrew to know this. If God is love, you're in. And if you're not in, God can't be love. You know? So once we've made that statement, God is love, then any policy, any doctrine, any theological statement which flies in the face of that and creates exclusion at any level cannot possibly be of God. Is I know that for many, many people, the sheer courage of changing the courage's stance, that was a turning point for endless people. That was like a liberation to countless people. And in my own small way, I know something of the loneliness of that journey. So I think that more people than you will ever know owe you a huge debt because you created a way of freedom for them. I think that's truly wonderful. I think in our case, rather extraordinarily, Oasis was thrown out of the Evangelical Alliance. We were given 3 days' notice, and we were told they were going to announce that they were throwing us out, and it was to do with a technicality because they said that on our website, though we'd announced our view, we'd not created space for other people's views. So they will still say to this day that we were asked to be removed. They removed us simply because of the technicality of the website. But you know, all I can say is the people that run the EA websites, they should get some new ones, because every website, you know, leaves space for comments and views, etc., etc. So anyone can post any opinion at any time. So it was a vacuous thing. It was a vacuous thing. But I'm absolutely sure, as you say, all these things are driven by money. They're driven by money. So what was it? Which was it? Was it World Vision in the States?
That's right, World Vision, yeah.
World Vision in the States, of course, announced that they were going to be utterly inclusive of people in same-sex relationships, and then 48 hours reversed that decision. Now, that's very weak leadership, to say the least. And I feel sorry for them. I'm not judgmental, just caught betwixt and between. But what's clear is their decisions were driven by money. I cannot tell you the number of Christian leaders who've sat even in this coffee house with me, or in some around here, because not all want to come in here because they want to be anonymous, and have told me, well, these are the exact words of one well-known leader: "I am utterly with you. But if you ever tell anyone I'm utterly with you, I will deny it." And I've heard that from so many people. In fact, the psychology of it is really interesting, because I wonder why it is that so many come, I mean, well-known leaders, so many come to tell me this thing, because it seems to me a dangerous thing to do, to tell me, because on this video I could announce their names, which I won't do, of course. But I realise that there is within us the deep desire to be known and to tell the truth. So they come and tell me the truth, and I understand. And actually, some of them have said to me, "Steve, I wish I could find the courage." Somebody came recently, a black church leader, and said, "I wish I could publish a book that said the same things as you've said, but I would lose my house and I'd lose my job." And I understand that completely. And so I always say to people, I'm in a different position to you. I can say things that are hard for you. But that's why I think progress is so slow in this and other important issues, but this is right at the forefront, isn't it? Because if I'm a pastor, a church leader, a vicar, I might lose my house and lose my job and my security for my kids. If I edit a magazine, I'm going to lose subscriptions. If I run a club, a membership club like the Evangelical Alliance, people are going to leave, and what does that do to my bottom line? So I know, just as you've said, that I know people who are on the council when the decisions were taken. It was a long process to ask us to leave. I've heard many reports of what actually happened, and I know it. Sadly, it was about money. But I'd like to say, because there's a video running, that I really don't blame anyone for that. I know it's hard, but all we do is kick the can down the road and leave it at the feet of another generation. In the end, someone has to have the courage to say, this has been an awful misleading of the Bible, as misleading as the old view that used to proclaim loudly apartheid, that black people were not worthy of a vote or the freedom. Now, it is interesting to read the theology of apartheid. Wonderful scholars, all with PhDs, quoting liberally Bible verses to explain why white people are superior to black ones. Don't be taken in by a guy who's got a PhD and who spins a lot of fancy words with the occasional Bible quote in. I bring you back to what I just said. If God is love, any policy, any behaviour, any doctrine, any theology that excludes and oppresses cannot be from God. I think that the church has had throughout my lifetime an obsession with sex. So when I was a kid, the church I belonged to, I remember a couple getting a divorce, and they were told they couldn't be members. Neither of them could be members of the church anymore. Divorce was a huge issue. When I was first a church leader, there was a divorce that took place in the Baptist church I was an assistant minister at, and it kind of split the church in so many ways. It had impacts on relationships that still stretch to this day, I think, some of them, which is really sad. Sex seems to do it. And then there was the issue of remarriage after that. I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying this. I have a friend who was very involved in the breakdown of a marriage. Not involved in it, but he had lots of things to say about it at the time. And then some years later, his marriage fell apart. And he came to see me because by then he found someone that he wanted to remarry. And I sat with him and I talked him through divorce and remarriage in the Old Testament and why, the marriage certificate, that there are no marriage certificates in the Old Testament, in the Bible. There aren't marriage certificates, there are divorce certificates. But the interesting thing is so there are divorce certificates in the Old Testament, so they stretch back a long way, But the interesting thing about divorce certificates in the Old Testament is they are issued by the husband, not by a court. And the whole point of a divorce certificate was so that the ex-wife, if you like, when she has a new opportunity to remarry, could present the divorce certificate to her new partner and say, here it is, I'm divorced. This man has no hold over me anymore. He can't come along and claim any land or anything. Here is the divorce certificate that allows you to marry me without feeling that there's some obligation I have to someone else. So the divorce certificate in the Bible, both Old and New Testament, is only a document to allow remarriage. But I'm 62, and the whole of my childhood life, it was first about divorce, and then it was about remarriage, and now it's about LG and B, and I think soon it's about to be about T. And the church always lags behind, and I just wish the church could get on the front foot and lead morally. Be the moral leader instead of the luggard who lags behind and is dragged kicking and screaming into new situations.
Thank you.
But do I ought to say, the heart of the Bible is about justice. It's about mercy. Poverty is out of control in our city. There are people sleeping all over the streets. Have you noticed that? Mental health issues are out of control. There is no funding for schools. Our NHS is at point of collapse in many, many places. It really is. This isn't being made up. Up here is the local library because we took it on as a church because the council couldn't afford to run it anymore. Why? Because local authorities are being squeezed for cash. The services that we need, social care is shrinking, adult social care as well as social care for children and intervention for children. Our prisons are out of control. As you know, as we hear on the news, the suicide rate in our prisons is the highest it's ever been. There's huge overcrowding. We've got a worldwide refugee problem. We've got wars going on. We've got men in power who threaten one another endlessly with nuclear weapons. And the church goes, hey, let's talk about gay people. And then says, why are we seen as irrelevant? Somebody wrote to me last week, and they said that my position was destroying the authority of the Bible. And I communicated back with them, and I said, no. The authority of the Bible has been destroyed. Open the front door, look around, talk to some people at work. The authority of the Bible has been totally eradicated by the church getting involved in all the wrong issues on all the wrong sides. What we have to do is rebuild the authority of the Bible by reading it well and reading it wisely. We need to be more biblical, not less biblical.